The first shot echoed across the dusty street of Snowflake, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1879, startling Willa Norwood from her thoughts as she hurried toward the mercantile with a basket of eggs tucked under her arm. She flinched at the sound, nearly dropping her precious cargo as rowdy cowboys burst from the saloon, their laughter cutting through the afternoon heat like a knife. This was not the life she had envisioned when her father had promised her a fresh start out west, away from the whispers and judgmental stares of Philadelphia society. Willa pressed herself against the weathered boards of the general store, trying to make herself invisible as the men staggered past. At 22, she had learned that in a town like Snowflake, a woman alone might as well be wearing a target on her back. Since her father's death 3 months prior, leaving her with nothing but debts and a dilapidated cabin on the outskirts of town, she had become painfully aware of just how precarious her position was. Well, if it ain't the professor's daughter," drawled a voice that made Willa's skin crawl. Jasper Tate, the local cattle baron's son, swaggered toward her with 2 of his cronies in tow. "Selling eggs now, are we? How the mighty have fallen." Willa lifted her chin, refusing to let him see how his words stung. "Excuse me, Mr. Tate. I have business to attend to." Jasper blocked her path, his whiskey-soured breath hot on her face. "You know, my offer still stands. Pretty thing like you shouldn't be living out in that shack all alone. My father has plenty of room at our ranch. And I've given you my answer, multiple times." Willa tried to step around him, but he caught her arm, causing her to stumble and drop her basket. The eggs shattered on the boardwalk, yellow yolks spreading across the weathered wood like spilled sunshine. "Look what you've made me do," Jasper said with mock concern. "Now what will you sell to pay your daddy's debts?" Tears of frustration burned behind Willa's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Those eggs represented a meal, maybe 2. She knelt to salvage what she could, ignoring the laughter of Jasper and his friends. "I believe the lady asked you to leave her be." The voice was low and steady, carrying the subtle hint of a southern drawl. Willa looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. As he stepped forward, she could make out a lean, weathered face beneath the brim of a dusty Stetson. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and the way he carried himself spoke of a man who knew his way around trouble. Jasper's hand drifted toward the revolver on his hip. "This ain't your concern, stranger. I'm making it my concern." The man's blue eyes remained fixed on Jasper, his stance casual but alert. "Now, seems to me you owe the lady for those eggs." A tense silence stretched between them until Jasper finally spat on the ground near Willa's skirts. "Ain't worth my time." He flicked a coin at her feet. "There's your charity, Miss Norwood. Don't spend it all at once." With a final glare at the stranger, Jasper and his friends retreated back toward the saloon. Willa stared at the coin, humiliation burning her cheeks. She wanted to leave it there, to hold on to the last shred of her pride, but hunger was a powerful motivator. She reached for it, only to find another hand there first, calloused but gentle. "Allow me," the stranger said, helping her to her feet and pressing the coin into her palm. He knelt to collect the broken eggshells and salvage the one unbroken egg from the wreckage of her basket. "Thank you, but you shouldn't have interfered," Willa said, tucking a stray lock of auburn hair behind her ear. "Jasper Tate has a long memory and his father practically owns this town." The stranger smiled, a genuine expression that softened the hard planes of his face. "I've dealt with his kind before. Name's Matthew Quincy, by the way. Most folks call me Matt." "Willa Norwood," she replied, taking her basket from him. "I should warn you, Mr. Quincy, that befriending me won't win you any favors in Snowflake." "Never been one for the popular path, Miss Norwood." Matt tipped his hat. "Mind if I walk you to wherever you're headed?" just to make sure there's no more trouble. Willa hesitated. Common sense told her to be wary of a stranger's kindness. It usually came with expectations. But there was something in his eyes, a steadiness that made her believe him to be genuine. "I was headed to the mercantile to trade these eggs," she said, looking ruefully at her nearly empty basket. "But now I'll have to go back home and start again tomorrow. If you're willing to accept a little help, I could use a home-cooked meal," Matt said. "I've been on the trail for weeks, and my cooking would make a buzzard turn up its beak. I'd be happy to pay for the privilege." Pride warred with practicality in Willa's mind. She needed the money, but accepting it felt too close to charity. As if reading her thoughts, Matt added, "Consider it a fair trade, food for funds." "I suppose I could manage that," Willa finally agreed. "Though I should warn you, our cabin is modest at best. After sleeping under the stars for a month, a roof of any kind sounds like luxury," Matt replied. They walked together out of town, the stares of the locals following them like persistent flies. Willa felt the weight of their judgment but held her head high. Let them talk. It wasn't as if her reputation could sink much lower after her father's disgrace. The cabin came into view as they crested a small hill, a simple structure of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney and a small garden plot beside it. Chickens scratched in the yard, and a thin tendril of smoke rose from the chimney. "You've kept the place up well," Matt commented, taking in the neat yard and the patches on the roof. "My father may have been many things, but he taught me how to use a hammer and saw," Willa said, unable to keep a note of pride from her voice. "Please come in." The interior was modest but clean, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Handmade furniture crafted by her father filled the space, a table and chairs, a bookshelf overflowing with well-worn volumes, and a rocking chair near the hearth. A curtain separated the single bedroom from the main living area. "Make yourself comfortable, Mr. Quincy. I'll get started on dinner." "Matt, please," he corrected, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "And I meant what I said about helping. Put me to work." Willa studied him for a moment, then nodded toward a bucket by the door. "We could use fresh water from the creek." While Matt fetched water, Willa prepared a simple meal of cornbread and beans with the last of her salted pork. It wasn't much, but it would fill their bellies. She was stirring the pot when Matt returned, water sloshing in the bucket. "You have a nice place here," he said, setting the bucket down. "Reminds me of where I grew up in Texas." "It's nothing special," Willa replied, turning away to hide the flush of pleasure his words brought. "But it's home." As they sat down to eat, Willa found herself watching Matt. There was an easy confidence about him, but not the arrogance she'd seen in men like Jasper Tate. His hands were work-roughened, his face tanned by the sun, and a small scar cut through his right eyebrow. He caught her looking and smiled, causing Willa to quickly return her attention to her plate. "So what brings you to Snowflake, Mr. Matt?" she asked. "Work, mainly. I've been handling horses for ranches up and down the territory, breaking the wild ones, training the young stock." He took a bite of cornbread. "This is delicious, by the way." "Thank you." Willa hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind since he'd intervened in town. "Do you make a habit of rescuing damsels in distress?" Matt chuckled, the sound warm in the small cabin. "Only on Tuesdays and every second Thursday." His expression grew more serious. "I don't like bullies, Miss Norwood. Never have." "Willa," she corrected. "And thank you truly, though I fear you've made an enemy of Jasper Tate. Wouldn't be my first." Matt set down his fork. "Mind if I ask what his problem is with you? Seems personal." Willa sighed, debating how much to share with this stranger, but something about Matt's steady gaze made her want to unburden herself. "My father was a professor of geology back east." He came here convinced there was gold in the hills around Snowflake. He persuaded half the town to invest in his mining operation, including Jasper's father. She traced a pattern on the worn tablecloth. There was no gold, just my father's dreams and other people's money gone like smoke. When he died of pneumonia 3 months ago, he left nothing but debts and angry investors. And they blame you for his mistakes, Matt said quietly. They do. Some think I was in on it, others just see me as an easy target now that I'm alone. Willa forced a smile. But I'm surviving. The garden provides vegetables, the chickens give eggs, and I do mending for those who'll still hire me. That can't be easy. It's not, Willa admitted, but I'm not ready to give up yet. Though sometimes I wonder if I should sell what little we have and try somewhere new, where no one knows my father's name. Matt considered her words, his blue eyes thoughtful. Sometimes running just means you have to start over again somewhere else. And sometimes staying and fighting is harder, but leads to something better. Their conversation continued as twilight deepened outside the cabin windows. Willa found herself telling Matt about her life before Snowflake, the libraries and concerts of Philadelphia, the dreams she'd once had of becoming a teacher. In turn, he spoke of his years drifting through the West, working ranches from Texas to Montana. "It's getting late," Willa finally said, noticing the darkness outside. "You're welcome to bed down by the fire tonight if you'd like. It's a long walk back to town." "I'd appreciate that," Matt replied. "Though I'll be up and gone by first light. I've got business at the Murphy Ranch tomorrow." Willa prepared a pallet for him near the hearth, suddenly aware of the impropriety of having a man she barely knew sleeping in her home. But the alternative was sending him into the night, and something in her rebelled at the thought. As she bid him good night and retreated behind the curtain to her small bedroom, Willa found herself wondering about the twist of fate that had brought Matthew Quincy to her aid today. She fell asleep to the unfamiliar but comforting sound of another person's breathing in the cabin that had felt so empty since her father's death. True to his word, Matt was gone when Willa woke the next morning. The pallet was neatly folded, and a small stack of coins sat on the table alongside a note. "For the best meal I've had in months. Hope to repay the hospitality someday. MQ." Willa stared at the money far more than a simple meal was worth. Pride urged her to run after him and return it, but practicality reminded her of the nearly empty pantry and the approaching winter. With a sigh, she tucked the coins into the jar where she kept her meager savings. Life in Snowflake continued its usual rhythm over the next few weeks. Willa sold eggs and vegetables from her garden, did mending for the few townspeople who would still employ her, and kept to herself as much as possible. She heard that Matt Quincy had taken a job breaking horses at the Murphy Ranch a few miles outside of town, but their paths didn't cross again. Until one rainy afternoon in late September, when a knock at her door startled Willa from her mending. She opened it to find Matt on her doorstep, rain dripping from his hat and a burlap sack in his hands. "Hope I'm not intruding," he said with a smile that warmed something inside her. "But Murphy's wife sent over some apples from their orchard, and I thought you might put them to good use." "That's very kind," Willa said, stepping back to let him in. "Though I suspect Mrs. Murphy doesn't know they're coming to me. She hasn't spoken 2 words to me since my father's passing." Matt set the sack on the table, rainwater pooling beneath it. "Let's just say she thinks they're going to supplement my own meals, which, in a roundabout way, they might." Willa raised an eyebrow. "Is that a hint, Mr. Quincy?" "A man can hope, Miss Norwood." He removed his wet hat, running a hand through his damp hair. "I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about your cooking since that night." "Well, I can't send you back out in this rain," Willa said, moving to stoke the fire. "And I suppose I do owe you for these apples." Apple cobbler might be on the menu tonight. Matt's expression brightened. Now that's worth getting soaked for. As the rain drummed on the roof, they fell into an easy rhythm. Willa prepared dinner while Matt helped by peeling apples and sharing stories about the horses he was training at Murphy's. The simple domesticity of it struck Willa as both foreign and familiar, like something from a life she might have had in another world. Over dinner, Matt's expression grew more serious. "I've been hearing talk in town," he said, setting down his fork. "About you." Willa stiffened. "I can imagine. And what gossip are they spreading now that you're behind on the property taxes for this land? That the county might seize it come November if they're not paid." The words hit Willa like a physical blow. She'd been scraping together what she could, but the sum needed was still far beyond her reach. "It's true," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father. He didn't leave affairs in good order. I've been trying to save, but how much do you need?" Matt asked. "That's not why I told you," Willa said quickly, mortified at the thought that he might see her as looking for charity. I know you don't, but I'd like to help if I can." "Why?" The question burst from her lips before she could stop it. "Why would you help me? You barely know me." Matt was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on hers across the table. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. And because I believe you deserve better than what this town has given you." Tears pricked at the corners of Willa's eyes. She blinked them away, unwilling to show such weakness. "I appreciate the sentiment, truly, but this is my problem to solve." "Fair enough," Matt said, though he looked like he wanted to argue. "But if you change your mind, the offer stands." They finished dinner in a comfortable silence, and afterward, Willa served the apple cobbler she'd made. The sweet scent filled the cabin, mixing with the petrichor from the rain outside. "This is heaven," Matt declared after his first bite. "You could sell these in town and make your fortune." Willa laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuineness. "Somehow I doubt the good people of Snowflake are lining up to buy baked goods from the daughter of the man who cheated them." "Their loss," Matt said firmly. "Though maybe that's selfish of me. Means more cobbler for those of us with better sense." As the evening wore on, the rain showed no signs of letting up. When Willa offered Matt the pallet by the fire again, he accepted with a grateful nod. "I'll be gone before first light," he promised. "Wouldn't want to cause you any more trouble with the town gossips." "I think that ship has sailed," Willa said wryly, "but I appreciate the thought." In the quiet darkness of her bedroom, Willa listened to the rain and the occasional crackle of the fire. Matt's presence on the other side of the curtain brought an unexpected sense of security. It had been so long since she'd felt anything but alone. This time when Willa woke, Matt was still there, stoking the morning fire. He looked up as she emerged from behind the curtain, her hair hastily braided and a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill. "I thought you'd be gone by now," she said, surprised. "Planned to be, but it's still coming down out there." He nodded toward the window where rain continued to fall steadily. "Hope you don't mind me staying a bit longer. I'll head out once it lets up." "Of course I don't mind, I was just—" Willa trailed off, unsure how to explain that she'd grown accustomed to people leaving. "I left some coffee on for you," Matt said, filling the silence. "And I thought I might fix that loose board on your porch before I go. Noticed it was about to give way yesterday." Willa wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup he offered. "You don't need to do that." "I know," Matt said simply. "I want to." By midday, the rain had stopped, but Matt was still there. He'd repaired the porch, fixed a leaky spot in the roof, and was now splitting firewood with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. Willa watched him from the doorway, a strange feeling taking root in her chest. It had been so long since anyone had done something for her without expecting payment or favors in return. When he finally prepared to leave, the sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Willa walked him to the edge of her property, unsure of what to say. "Thank you for everything," she finally managed. "The repairs, the company. It's been nice not to be alone, even for a little while." Matt studied her face for a long moment. "I'll be back if that's all right with you. Got some more ideas for improvements around here, and Murphy gave me Sundays off." "You don't have to, I know," he interrupted gently. "But I'd like to, unless you'd rather I didn't." Willa looked up at him, at the genuine question in his eyes, and found herself unable to say what propriety demanded. "I'd like that," she admitted softly. True to his word, Matt returned the following Sunday, and the Sunday after that. Each visit brought new repairs to the cabin, stories from his work at the Murphy Ranch, and a growing ease between them that Willa found both comforting and terrifying. She hadn't allowed herself to trust anyone since discovering the extent of her father's deceptions. Yet she found herself looking forward to Matt's visits with an eagerness that frightened her. On a crisp October morning, Willa was in town buying flour when she overheard two women talking outside the mercantile. "That Norwood girl has set her cap for the new horse trainer," one said in a stage whisper. "Just like her father, always looking for the easy way out of trouble." "Well, she'd better hurry if she wants to snare him before she's thrown out of that cabin," the other replied. "Tax collector's coming next week, and word is she's not even halfway to what she owes." Willa stiffened, clutching her package of flour tighter as she hurried past them. The worst part was that they were right about the taxes. Despite her best efforts, she was still far short of the sum needed. She was so distracted by these thoughts that she didn't notice Jasper Tate until she collided with his chest on the boardwalk. Well, if it isn't Miss Norwood," Jasper drawled, steadying her with hands that lingered too long on her arms. "Just the lady I've been meaning to see." Willa stepped back, breaking his grip. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Tate. Now, that's where you're wrong." Jasper's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been talking with my pa, and we might have a solution to your financial difficulties." "I wasn't aware my affairs were any of your concern," Willa replied coldly. "Oh, but they are. See, pa still holds most of the notes your father left behind. And I've been thinking about that little piece of land you're living on." Jasper leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. "It'd make a nice addition to our holdings. Water access, good grazing land. That land isn't for sale. Might not be up to you much longer." Jasper straightened, adjusting his vest. "But I'm feeling generous. How about this? You agree to come work at our house cooking, cleaning, tending to domestic matters, and we'll consider the debt settled. Might even let you keep a room in that cabin, long as you understand the land belongs to us." Willa felt sick at the implication behind his words. Jasper had made his interests clear even before her father's death, and she had no illusions about what domestic matters would entail. "I'd rather lose everything than accept that offer," she said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Jasper's face hardened. "Pride's a luxury you can't afford, Miss Norwood. Think it over. Offer stands until the tax collector comes." He tipped his hat with mock courtesy before striding away. Willa returned home, her mind racing with possible solutions, but each seemed more impossible than the last. She could sell her mother's silver locket, the only thing of value she had left, but it wouldn't bring in enough. She could beg for more mending work in town, but too many doors were closed to her. She was still turning over options when Matt arrived later that afternoon, a brace of rabbits in one hand and a troubled expression on his face. "Ran into Jasper Tate in town," he said without preamble. "He seemed mighty pleased with himself. Said something about you coming to your senses soon." Willa sank onto the porch step, suddenly exhausted. He offered to settle my father's debts in exchange for me becoming a servant in his house. Matt's jaw tightened. That's not all he's after. No, Willa agreed quietly. It's not. Matt set the rabbits aside and sat next to her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Let me help you, Willa. I've got savings. Not a fortune, but enough to clear the taxes. I can't take your money, Matt. It wouldn't be taking. It would be. He paused, searching for words. An investment in your future in this place. And what would you expect in return? Willa asked, hating the suspicion in her voice but unable to suppress it. Matt looked at her for a long moment, hurt flickering across his features. Nothing. That's not how this works, not for me. He stood abruptly. I should go. Matt, wait. Willa caught his hand. I'm sorry, it's just, I'm not used to kindness without conditions. He turned back to her, his expression softening. I know, and I understand why you'd question it. He sat down again, still holding her hand. How about this? You accept the help, and when you're back on your feet, you can repay me, with interest even, if it makes you feel better. Willa looked down at their joined hands. Why are you doing this? Because I care about what happens to you, Matt said simply. More than I probably should, given how short a time I've known you. The honesty in his voice made Willa look up, meeting his gaze. What she saw there sent a tremor through her concern, yes, but something deeper, something that mirrored the feelings she'd been trying to ignore in herself. I care about you too, she whispered, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. And I'm afraid of what that means. Matt reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. It doesn't have to mean anything you're not ready for it to mean. They sat in silence as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. Finally, Willa spoke. If I accept your help, it would be as a loan. One that I intend to repay in full. Agreed, Matt said, a smile breaking across his face. Though I hope you'll let me keep coming around even after the debt is settled. I think that could be arranged, Willa replied, returning his smile. The following week, Matt accompanied Willa to the county office to pay the property taxes. The clerk's eyebrows rose at the sight of the full amount, but he processed the payment without comment. As they left the building, Willa felt a weight lift from her shoulders, one burden at least temporarily relieved. Thank you, she said as they walked back toward her cabin. I don't know what I would have done without your help. You'd have found a way, Matt replied confidently. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. They were passing the saloon when Jasper Tate emerged, flanked by two of his usual companions. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Willa and Matt together. Well, look who it is, he called, stepping into their path. Did you give my offer some thought, Miss Norwood? She doesn't need your offer, Matt said before Willa could respond. The taxes are paid. Jasper's face darkened. Is that right? And I suppose you're the knight in shining armor who came to her rescue. He turned to Willa, his voice dripping with contempt. Didn't take long for you to find someone else to leech off of, did it? Like father, like daughter. Willa flinched as if she'd been struck. That's not, you need to walk away now, Tate, Matt interrupted, his voice dangerously calm. Or what? Jasper stepped closer, alcohol emboldening him. Everyone in town knows she's nothing but a cheat's daughter, worthless just like her old man. Matt's hands curled into fists, but Willa placed a restraining hand on his arm. He's not worth it, she murmured. Listen to your whore, Cowboy, Jasper sneered. She knows what's good for her. What happened next was so fast that Willa barely registered it. Matt's right hand shot out, catching Jasper square in the jaw and sending him stumbling backward into his friends. Before Jasper could recover, Matt had him by the collar, pushing him up against the saloon wall. Apologize to the lady, Matt growled. Jasper spat blood onto the dirt. Go to hell. Matt drew back his fist again, but Willa stepped between them. Stop, this isn't helping. For a moment, she thought Matt wouldn't listen, but then he released Jasper with a disgusted shove. "You're not worth the trouble I'd get into for beating you as thoroughly as you deserve." Jasper straightened his vest, trying to recover some dignity. "This isn't over," he promised, his eyes darting between them. "My father still holds your daddy's notes, Miss Norwood. The land taxes may be paid, but those debts aren't going anywhere." As Jasper and his friends retreated back into the saloon, Willa felt the weight settle on her shoulders again. One problem solved, another still looming. "I'm sorry," Matt said as they continued walking. "I shouldn't have lost my temper." "He deserved worse than what you gave him," Willa replied, "but fighting him only gives him more reason to make trouble for us." "Us?" Matt's eyebrow raised. Willa felt her cheeks warm. "Well, you've certainly tied your reputation to mine by now, for better or worse." They reached her cabin as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Matt built a fire while Willa prepared a simple dinner, the domesticity of the routine now familiar and comforting over the meal. Matt brought up what had been bothering him since their encounter with Jasper. "How much do you owe on those notes he mentioned?" Willa sighed, setting down her fork. "More than I could hope to pay in a year, even if the entire town suddenly decided to hire me for mending. My father borrowed heavily to fund his mining operation. And Tate's father holds all the notes, most of them. A few went to other investors, but Mr. Tate was the primary backer." Willa's expression darkened. "Jasper's been hinting for months that his father might be persuaded to forgive the debt if I made myself agreeable to him." "That's not going to happen," Matt said, his voice hard. "No," Willa agreed. "It's not, but I'm running out of options, Matt." Matt was quiet for a long moment, contemplating his next words. "I might have a proposal," he said finally. "Though I'll understand if you don't like it. I'm listening. I've been saving for years, planning to buy my own place someday. A small ranch, nothing fancy. I've got enough for a decent start." Matt met her eyes across the table. "What if we combined our resources? Your land, my savings. We could make something of this place, raise horses, maybe some cattle, split the profits." Willa stared at him. "You want to be business partners?" "I want to help you keep your home and build something that can support you. If that means being partners, then yes." Matt hesitated, then added softly, "Though I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about other possibilities for us." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Willa began, but words failed her. The idea was tempting more than tempting. Not just the business proposal, but the hint of something more. Yet fear held her back. "I need time to think about this." "Of course," Matt said quickly. "It's a big decision. No rush." But time was exactly what they didn't have, as events the next day would prove. Willa was in the garden harvesting the last of the season's vegetables when the sound of approaching horses made her look up. Her heart sank as she recognized Jasper Tate's distinctive black gelding, alongside his father's bay stallion. Silas Tate was a larger, more imposing version of his son, a man who had built his cattle empire through determination and ruthlessness, in equal measure. He rarely ventured into town these days, preferring to send Jasper or his foreman to handle business. Willa straightened, wiping her hands on her apron as the men dismounted. "Mr. Tate, this is unexpected." Silas Tate removed his hat, revealing silver-streaked dark hair and cold eyes. "Miss Norwood, I believe we have business to discuss. If this is about my father's debts, I'm aware of them and working to save your breath, girl," Silas interrupted. "I'm not here to negotiate payment plans. I'm here to collect." Jasper smirked behind his father, his split lip from the altercation with Matt still visible. Willa fought to keep her expression neutral, though fear was coiling in her stomach. "The notes aren't due for some time yet," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Silas pulled a sheaf of papers from his coat. Actually, they are. The terms allow me to call in the full amount at my discretion, and I'm exercising that right. You have until the end of the month to pay in full, or I'll be forced to take legal action to seize this property in compensation. That's less than 2 weeks, Willa protested. You know I can't possibly, not my problem, Silas cut her off. Your father knew the terms when he took my money. If you can't pay, I suggest you consider the alternative my son has generously offered. Willa's hands curled into fists at her sides. You can't just, I can and I have, Silas said coldly. End of the month, Miss Norwood, not a day later. He turned to remount his horse, then paused. Oh, and I understand you've been keeping company with Matthew Quincy. You might want to inform him that his services will no longer be required at the Murphy Ranch. What? Willa's shock was genuine. What does Matt have to do with this? Let's just say I expressed my displeasure to Murphy about his choice of employees, particularly those who assault my son. Silas swung into the saddle. Murphy knows which side his bread is buttered on. Quincy will be looking for new employment by sundown. As the Tates rode away, Willa stood frozen in the yard, the basket of vegetables forgotten at her feet. The enormity of what had just happened washed over her in waves. Not only was she about to lose her home, but Matt had lost his job because of her, because he had defended her honor. Willa was still sitting on the porch steps, numb with shock, when Matt arrived hours later. One look at his face told her he already knew about his dismissal. Murphy told me, he said, sitting beside her. Said he was sorry, but he couldn't afford to cross Tate. This is all my fault, Willa whispered. If you hadn't defended me, stop, Matt said firmly. None of this is your fault. Tate and his son are bullies, plain and simple. They're used to getting their way, and they're angry that we're standing up to them. Willa told him about Silas Tate's ultimatum regarding the debts. As she spoke, despair threatened to overwhelm her. I don't know what to do, Matt. Everything my father worked for, everything I've fought to keep, it's all slipping away. Matt was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Remember what I suggested yesterday about combining our resources, a partnership, Willa nodded. Yes, but... Matt took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. What if it was more than that? Willa looked at him questioningly. What if it was a marriage? Matt said quietly. Your land, my savings. Together we might have enough to pay off Tate and still have something left to build on. Willa stared at him, speechless. Of all the possible solutions, this was the last one she had expected. I know it's sudden, Matt continued, his words coming faster now. And I know we haven't known each other long, but I care for you, Willa, more than I thought possible in such a short time. And I think I hope you might feel something for me too. Matt, Willa began, but he held up a hand. You don't have to answer now, think about it. If the idea doesn't appeal to you, we can find another way. He stood, picking up his hat. I should go, give you space to consider. Wait. Willa caught his hand, rising to stand before him. Are you proposing to me out of convenience, or? Matt's eyes held hers, steady and sincere. I won't pretend the timing isn't influenced by circumstances, but my feelings aren't. I was headed here anyway, Willa. Maybe not this fast, but this was where my heart was leading me. Tears pricked at Willa's eyes, but for once they weren't born of despair. No one has ever. She whispered, unable to complete the thought. Matt understood anyway. You deserve someone who sees your value, he said softly. Who knows that you're not just something, but everything. The words struck a chord deep within Willa, reminding her of all the times she'd been made to feel worthless since her father's disgrace. All the whispers, the turned backs, the doors closed in her face. They told me I was nothing, she said, the words catching on a sob that had been building for months. The whole town, that I was just a burden, a reminder of my father's sins. Matt's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle but firm. "Then they never knew what everything was," he said fiercely. "Because that's what you are, Willa. Everything." The kiss that followed was both an answer and a beginning. Willa leaned into him, feeling for the first time in months, perhaps years, that she was exactly where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, Matt rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" he asked, a smile in his voice. "Yes," Willa whispered. "Yes to all of it." They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Snowflake. The ceremony was simple, witnessed only by the Murphy family, who defied Willa Tate's influence to stand by Matt. Mrs. Murphy even provided a small cake and flowers for the occasion. The newlyweds returned to Willa's cabin, their cabin now, with a plan already forming. Matt's savings, combined with the small amount Willa had set aside and the sale of his horse, gave them just enough to meet Willa Tate's demand. It would leave them with very little to start their new life together, but they would still have the land and each other. When they arrived at the Tate ranch to settle the debt, Silas didn't bother to hide his surprise or his displeasure. "So the rumors are true," he said, looking between Willa and Matt with narrowed eyes. "A convenient marriage indeed." "Nothing convenient about loving someone, Mr. Tate," Matt replied evenly, placing the money on the desk between them. "That's the full amount as stipulated in the notes. We'll take those papers now, if you don't mind." Silas counted the money slowly, his expression unreadable. "This settles your father's debt," he finally said to Willa. "But don't think I'll forget the trouble you've caused." "The trouble we've caused?" Matt's voice hardened. "Your son has been harassing my wife for months, and you tried to force her into servitude to clear a debt that wasn't even hers. I'd say we're the ones who should be holding grudges." Silas's face flushed with anger, but he pushed the canceled notes across the desk without further comment. As Willa gathered them, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a burden she had carried since her father's death, finally released. Outside, as they mounted their horses to leave, Jasper Tate appeared from the stables. His expression darkened at the sight of them, but he made no move to approach. "This isn't over," he called as they rode past. "You've made enemies you can't afford, Quincy." Matt didn't bother to reply, and Willa held her head high as they rode away from the Tate ranch. She wouldn't give Jasper the satisfaction of seeing her fear. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Willa's life, despite the hard work and uncertainty that came with their new beginning. They had the land free and clear now, but little else. Matt took odd jobs breaking horses for smaller ranchers who weren't under Tate's influence, while Willa continued to sell eggs and vegetables, and took in washing from the few families in town who would still hire her. Slowly, they began to build their dream. Matt constructed a small corral near the cabin, planning for the horses they would eventually breed. Willa expanded the garden, planting seeds for the spring that would help feed them through the next year. They worked side by side from dawn until dusk, falling into bed exhausted but satisfied each night. And through it all, their feelings for each other deepened. What had begun partly as a practical arrangement blossomed into something neither had fully expected: a partnership in every sense, built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and growing love. But the shadow of the Tates' enmity never fully lifted. Silas used his influence to ensure that many doors remained closed to the Quincys. Supplies they needed often came at inflated prices, if they were available at all. The better-paying jobs mysteriously dried up whenever Matt applied for them. "He's trying to drive us out," Willa said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Make it so difficult that we give up and leave." "Then he doesn't know us very well," Matt replied, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "We're not quitters." Winter came early that year, bringing with it new challenges. The cabin, sturdy as it was, needed additional weatherproofing against the harsh Arizona Territory winds. Their supplies, carefully rationed, would be stretched thin before spring arrived. But they had each other, and a determination that grew stronger with each obstacle overcome. It was during the first major snowfall that opportunity finally knocked. A cattle buyer from California, passing through on his way to Texas, was caught in the storm and sought shelter at their cabin. Harold Watson was an older man with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner that both Willa and Matt appreciated. Over dinner, as the wind howled outside, Watson explained his business. "I represent several large ranches in California. They're always looking for good breeding stock and trained horses. The problem is finding reliable suppliers out this way." Matt exchanged a glance with Willa. "We're planning to get into horse breeding ourselves, small scale at first, but with plans to expand." Watson studied them over the rim of his coffee cup. "Might be I could help with that. If your stock is good, I'd be interested in a standing order. Pay fair prices too, not like some of these local operators." By the time Watson departed 3 days later, when the snow had cleared enough for travel, they had the beginnings of a business arrangement. He would return in the spring to see their progress and potentially place an order for horses to be delivered the following year. "This could be the break we need," Willa said as they watched Watson's wagon disappear down the snowy track. "A buyer from outside Tate's influence." "It means we need to step up our plans," Matt replied. "Get those brood mares sooner rather than later." The opportunity came in an unexpected form a week later. Word reached Snowflake that a small ranch north of town had been hit hard by the early winter. The owner, an elderly man named Jenkins, had fallen ill and was selling off his stock at reduced prices before heading east to live with his daughter. Matt rode out through the snow to investigate, returning with news that Jenkins had 3 quality mares, already bred, that he was willing to sell for a price they could just afford if they used most of their remaining savings. "It's a risk," he admitted to Willa that night. "It leaves us with almost nothing in reserve if something goes wrong. If we don't take risks, we'll never build anything," Willa replied, her faith in their future unwavering. "I say we do it." The mares arrived a week later, led by Matt through a light snowfall. They were beautiful animals, 2 bays and a dappled gray with the strong legs and deep chests that spoke of good breeding. Willa fell in love with them immediately, especially the gray, who nuzzled her hand with velvet soft lips when offered an apple. "She likes you," Matt observed with a smile. "What will you name her?" Willa stroked the mare's neck, considering. "Hope," she decided, "because that's what she represents for us." As winter settled in earnest around their small homestead, life fell into a rhythm. Matt cared for the horses and undertook repairs and improvements to the cabin and outbuildings. Willa kept house, tended to their stores, and worked on the quilts and clothing she sold or traded in town. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, planning for the spring and the future they were building together. It was during one such evening, as Christmas approached, that Willa finally found the courage to share news she had been keeping to herself for several weeks. "Matt," she said, setting aside her mending, "there's something I need to tell you." He looked up from the bridle he was repairing, his expression curious. "What is it?" We're." Willa took a deep breath, a smile breaking across her face despite her nervousness. "We're going to have a baby, come summer." The bridle fell forgotten from Matt's hands as he crossed to kneel before her chair, his eyes wide with wonder. "A baby, you're sure?" Willa nodded, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. "Pretty sure. All the signs are there." Matt's hand reached out, hovering just above her still flat stomach as if seeking permission. Willa took his hand and placed it against her, covering it with her own. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." The kiss they shared was tender, full of promise and plans for a future that now included not just the two of them, but the child they had created together. The news added urgency to their preparations. They would need more than ever to make their horse breeding business successful, not just for themselves, but for the child who would depend on them. Matt worked longer hours, taking on additional jobs when he could find them, determined to provide for his growing family. Willa worried about him pushing himself too hard, especially as the winter deepened and the work became more grueling. But there was a light in Matt's eyes now, a purpose that drove him forward through exhaustion and hardship. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted one night as they lay together in their narrow bed, his hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her belly. "A home, a wife, a child on the way. For years I was just drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. And now?" Willa asked, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingers. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere but here with you." He kissed her palm. "You've given me something I didn't even know I was looking for." Spring arrived with its promise of renewal. The mares grew heavy with their foals, their sides swelling as Willa's own body changed to accommodate the growing life within. The garden was planted, new fence posts set, and the corral expanded in anticipation of the new arrivals, both equine and human. The first foal arrived in early April, a sturdy colt with his mother's bay coloring and a white star on his forehead. Matt was there for the birth, his experienced hands guiding the foal into the world. Willa watched from the edge of the corral, her heart full as Matt helped the wobbly-legged colt find his feet and his mother's milk. "He's perfect," she said as Matt joined her, wiping his hands on a rag. "Strong and healthy." "Just like his mother," Matt replied, his eyes moving meaningfully to Willa's rounded belly. "And just like our little one will be." The other two mares foaled within a week, another colt and a filly, both healthy and vigorous. It felt like a good omen, this successful beginning to their breeding program. Even better, word reached them that Harold Watson would be returning to Snowflake in June, earlier than expected, and was eager to see their stock. But as their prospects brightened, the shadow of the Tates' enmity grew darker. Jasper had been seen watching their property from the ridge above, his intentions unclear but certainly not friendly. Supplies they had ordered from a neighboring town mysteriously never arrived. And rumors circulated in Snowflake that the Quincy's were struggling, on the verge of giving up, rumors that could only have one source. "They are trying to undermine us," Matt said grimly after returning from a trip to town where he had overheard such talk. "Make it harder for us to do business." "But why?" Willa asked, resting a hand on her now prominent belly. "We've paid our debts. We're no threat to them." "Pride," Matt replied simply. "We defied them, stood up to them when everyone else in this town bows down. Men like the Tates don't forget that kind of perceived insult." Their concerns were validated a week later when Matt discovered cut fence wires on the north side of their property, the section that bordered Tate land. Nothing had been stolen and the horses were safe, but the message was clear. The harassment would continue. Matt repaired the fence and began keeping a loaded rifle nearer to hand. They took turns keeping watch at night, worried that the next attack might be more direct. The strain began to tell on both of them, especially Willa, now in her 7th month and finding it harder to manage her usual tasks. It was during this tense time that an unexpected ally emerged. Sarah Murphy, wife of Matt's former employer, arrived at the cabin one afternoon with a basket of supplies and a determined expression. "I've heard the talk in town," she said without preamble when Willa opened the door. And I've seen Jasper Tate smirking about it. Whatever they're planning, it's not good. Willa invited her in, touched by this show of support from someone who risked Tate's displeasure by associating with them. Over tea, Sarah shared what she knew. Silas has been talking with the banker, Jenkins. They're trying to call in loans from anyone who does business with you, pressure them to stop. Sarah's expression hardened. It's not right, what they're doing. My husband may have had to let Matt go, but we haven't forgotten how he helped us when our son was sick last year. What can we do? Willa asked, fear for their future mingling with anger at the Tates' tactics. Fight back, Sarah said simply. Not with violence, that's what they want, an excuse to bring the law down on you, but there are other ways. She explained that not everyone in Snowflake was under Tate's thumb. The new doctor and his wife, who had arrived last winter, had no love for Silas after he tried to dictate how the doctor should treat patients. The blacksmith, Jensen, had nearly lost his business to Tate's machinations, and had only survived because he was the only skilled smith for 20 miles. And there were others, small ranchers, shopkeepers, families who had suffered from the Tates' influence over the years. If you can hold out until Watson returns and secures your contract, you'll have income that Tate can't touch, Sarah finished. And with allies in town, even if they're quiet ones, you'll be harder to isolate. After Sarah left, Willa shared everything with Matt when he returned from working with the young colts. His expression grew thoughtful as he considered Sarah's information. She's right about fighting back, he said finally. But we need to be smart about it. Draw the Tates out, make them show their hand where others can see it. How? Willa asked. Matt smiled, a determined glint in his eye. By succeeding. Nothing will drive them crazier than watching us thrive despite their efforts. In the weeks that followed, they implemented their plan. Matt reached out to the allies Sarah had mentioned, offering fair deals for services and goods that bypassed the Tate-controlled businesses. Willa wrote to Harold Watson, confirming his visit and subtly suggesting that he might want to consider lodging with them rather than in town, where the Tates could potentially interfere. Their strategy was beginning to bear fruit when disaster struck in the form of a spring storm that roared down from the mountains with little warning. The rain came in sheets, turning the usually dry creek that bordered their property into a raging torrent. Matt worked through the night to move the horses to higher ground, fighting against the wind and water that threatened to sweep them away. By morning, the worst had passed, but the damage was extensive. Fences were down, the corral half collapsed, and worst of all, the creek had changed course, cutting across the corner of their property where they had planned to expand the grazing land. We can rebuild the fences and the corral, Matt said as they surveyed the destruction. But the creek? That's going to be a problem. We needed that land. Willa, now heavily pregnant and exhausted from the night's ordeal, fought against despair. What do we do now? Before Matt could answer, the sound of approaching horses made them turn. Jasper Tate and two of his ranch hands were riding toward them, their expressions a mixture of satisfaction and false concern. Quite a storm, Jasper called as they drew near. Looks like it hit you pretty hard. Matt stepped slightly in front of Willa, his stance protective. What do you want, Tate? Just being neighborly, Jasper replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thought you might need some help cleaning up this mess. His gaze swept over their damaged property, lingering on the diverted creek. Course might be easier to just cut your losses. Sell the place to someone who can afford to fix it up right. Not interested, Matt said flatly. Jasper shrugged, turning his horse. Suit yourself. But that offer won't stay open forever. Place like this in this condition won't fetch much at auction when you're forced to sell. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good day, Mrs. Quincy. Do take care of yourself in your delicate condition. As they rode away, Willa's hand tightened on Matt's arm. He knew, she whispered. He knew exactly where the creek would overflow. Matt's expression darkened as understanding dawned. The cut fence we found last week, it wasn't just harassment. They were testing how vulnerable that section was. You think they diverted the creek deliberately? Willa asked, horror in her voice. I'd bet my last dollar on it, Matt replied grimly. Question is, what do we do about it? The answer came in an unexpected form the next day. Doc Anderson, the physician Sarah had mentioned, arrived at their cabin ostensibly to check on Willa's pregnancy. But after the examination, he lingered, helping Matt clear debris from the yard. Heard about your trouble with the creek, the doctor said casually as they worked. Funny thing, same thing happened to Jensen the blacksmith last year. Creek mysteriously changed course after a storm flooded his workshop. That right? Matt's attention sharpened. Yes, indeed. Right after he refused to sell to Tate. Anderson wiped sweat from his brow. Even stranger, the creek went back to its original bed a few months later after Jensen had already sold and left town, almost like someone had been moving rocks and earth around to change its flow. The implication was clear, and it fit with what they already suspected. The Tates had deliberately sabotaged their property, using the storm as cover. The question was how to prove it and how to fix the damage before Watson arrived to see their operation. That evening, as Willa and Matt discussed their options, a knock at the door interrupted them. Matt answered it cautiously, rifle in hand, only to find Jensen the blacksmith standing on their porch. Heard you had some trouble with the creek, Jensen said without preamble. Thought you might use some help putting it right. Over the next several days, a small but determined group of Snowflake residents, those who had their own reasons to resent the Tates' influence, came to the Quincy homestead. They helped rebuild fences, repair the corral, and most importantly, began the labor-intensive process of redirecting the creek back to its original course. Never thought I'd see this, Matt said to Willa as they watched 5 men working together to move large rocks into the creek bed. People standing up to the Tates, even quietly. Maybe they were just waiting for someone else to go first, Willa replied, her hand resting on her belly where their child stirred restlessly. News of the community effort spread quickly, as did rumors about the Tates' possible involvement in the creek's diversion. Silas and Jasper made no appearance at the Quincy property, but their anger was evident in the increasing hostility shown to anyone known to be helping the Quincys. By the time Harold Watson arrived in early June, the creek had been largely returned to its proper course, the fences rebuilt, and the corral expanded. The foals were growing strong, showing the quality of their breeding, and Willa, now in her final month of pregnancy, had transformed the cabin into a comfortable home where Watson could stay during his visit. Watson was impressed with what he saw. You've done well, he told Matt as they walked the property, inspecting the young horses. Especially considering the obstacles I've heard about. We've had help, Matt acknowledged. Good neighbors who believe in what we're trying to build here. And enemies too, from what I gather. Watson's shrewd eyes missed nothing. The Tates have quite a reputation, reached all the way to California. They've made things difficult, Matt admitted, but we're not giving up. Watson nodded approvingly. Good, because I like what I see here. These colts will be fine animals by next year, and I'm prepared to place an order now for all 3, with an advance payment to secure the deal. The amount he named was generous enough to see them through the coming year and allow for expansion of their breeding program. Matt accepted with a firm handshake, relief and pride mingling in his expression. We won't let you down, he promised. I know you won't, Watson replied. I don't back losing propositions, Mr. Quincy, And despite what some in town might think, you and your wife are winners." The deal was formalized that evening over dinner, with Willa serving the best meal their modest supplies could provide. Watson departed the next morning, promising to return in a year to collect the horses and potentially place additional orders if the quality remained high. As they watched him ride away, Willa leaned against Matt, his arm around her shoulders. "We did it," she said softly. "Despite everything, we did it." "We're just getting started," Matt replied, kissing the top of her head. "But yes, this is a big step forward." Their celebration was interrupted by the first pains of Willa's labor, beginning gradually but intensifying as the day progressed. Matt sent one of the ranch hands who had been helping them to fetch Doc Anderson, then set about preparing the cabin, as Willa had instructed weeks earlier, heating water, gathering clean linens, and trying not to show his mounting anxiety. The doctor arrived by mid-afternoon, by which time Willa's pains were coming regularly. He shooed Matt outside, where he paced the porch like one of their colts, jumping at every sound from within. The labor was long and difficult. Night fell, and still Matt waited, the sounds of Willa's pain tearing at his heart. When her cries reached a crescendo and then fell silent, replaced by the thin wail of a newborn, he nearly collapsed with relief. Doc Anderson emerged eventually, his shirt sleeves rolled up and a weary smile on his face. "Congratulations, Mr. Quincy. You have a daughter. Small but strong, lunged and healthy. Your wife is tired but doing well." Matt entered the cabin on unsteady legs to find Willa propped up on pillows, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. She looked exhausted but radiant, her smile as bright as the summer sun when she saw him. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Matt approached almost reverently, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. Willa tilted the bundle so he could see the tiny face within, red and wrinkled, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes tightly shut against the light. "She's perfect," he whispered, reaching out to touch a miniature hand that immediately wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. "What shall we call her?" Willa looked down at their daughter, her expression thoughtful. "How about Faith? Because that's what brought us here, faith in each other and in the future we're building." "Faith Quincy," Matt tested the name, smiling. "I like it." As Matt held his daughter for the first time, with Willa watching them through tired but happy eyes, the fear and uncertainty of the past months seemed to recede. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not just the two of them now, but three. Word of Faith's birth spread quickly through Snowflake. Sarah Murphy arrived the next day with a handmade quilt and a basket of supplies. Jensen's wife brought a small wooden cradle that her husband had crafted. Even Doc Anderson's wife stopped by with a batch of her famous biscuits and offered to help Willa with the baby whenever needed. The support was overwhelming, especially after months of feeling isolated by the Tates' influence. It seemed that Faith's arrival had cemented the Quincy's place in the community, giving those who had quietly supported them an excuse to do so more openly. The Tates, however, were conspicuously silent. No congratulations came from their ranch, not that any had been expected. But there were no new incidents, either no cut fences, no mysterious problems with the creek. It was as if they had decided to bide their time, waiting for a better opportunity to strike. Summer passed in a blur of baby care and ranch work. Faith thrived under her parents' attentive care, growing stronger and more alert each day. The foals developed well, showing the quality that Watson had recognized. And the creek, returned to its proper course, provided water for their expanding grazing land without further incident. By autumn, they had begun to feel cautiously optimistic about their future. The advance from Watson had allowed them to purchase another mare and make improvements to the cabin in preparation for the coming winter. Willa, recovered from childbirth, had resumed her place as Matt's partner in all aspects of their operation, with Faith often accompanying her in a sling as she worked around the property. It was during a trip to town in late October, their first as a family since Faith's birth, that they encountered Jasper Tate again. He emerged from the saloon as they were loading supplies into their wagon, his eyes narrowing at the sight of them. "The happy family," he sneered, approaching with the slightly unsteady gait of a man who had been drinking. Enjoying your temporary success, Matt stepped between Jasper and the wagon where Willa was settling Faith. "We're not looking for trouble, Tate. No, that's a change." Jasper's gaze slid to Willa and the baby. "Cute kid. Be a shame if anything happened to your little family enterprise." The threat, thinly veiled as it was, made Matt's hands curl into fists, but Willa's voice, calm but carrying, broke the tension. "Is that really how you want to do this, Mr. Tate? In broad daylight, with half the town watching?" She nodded toward the storefront where several people had paused to observe the confrontation. "I would have thought you'd be more discreet, like with the creek." Jasper's face flushed, confirming their suspicions about his involvement. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his eyes darted to the onlookers. "I think you do," Willa continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Just like you know about the fence and the mysteriously canceled orders and all the other little accidents that have plagued us." By now, a small crowd had gathered, including Doc Anderson and Jensen the blacksmith. The public accusation hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Jasper looked around, suddenly aware of the hostile stares directed his way. His hand twitched toward his gun, but he thought better of it with so many witnesses. "You can't prove anything," he finally said. "Not yet," Matt agreed, his voice hard. "But keep pushing and we will. And when that happens, it won't just be us standing against you and your father." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Jasper's face as he registered the united front forming against him. Without another word, he turned and stalked back into the saloon, leaving a buzz of conversation in his wake. "That was risky," Matt said quietly to Willa as they climbed into the wagon, "but also brilliant." Willa adjusted Faith's blanket, her hands steady now that the confrontation was over. "He needed to know that we're not alone anymore, and that we're not afraid to fight back." The ride home was quiet, both of them contemplating what had just happened. They had publicly challenged the Tates, something few in Snowflake had dared to do. The question now was how Silas and Jasper would respond. They didn't have to wait long for the answer. The next morning, Silas Tate himself rode onto their property, flanked by Jasper and 3 ranch hands. Matt saw them coming from where he was working in the corral and moved quickly to the cabin to warn Willa. "Stay inside with Faith," he said, taking his rifle from above the door. "I'll handle this." Willa nodded, gathering their daughter close as Matt stepped onto the porch to meet the unwelcome visitors. Silas Tate reined in his horse at a respectful distance, his expression unreadable. "Quincy," he said by way of greeting, "we need to talk." "Nothing to talk about," Matt replied, the rifle held casually but visibly at his side. "Unless you're here to apologize for the trouble you've caused us." A tense silence followed, broken finally by an unexpected sound: Silas Tate's laughter. "You've got spine, I'll give you that," he said. "Both of you do." Matt's confusion must have shown on his face because Silas continued. "Oh, I heard all about yesterday's little showdown in town. My son may have left out some details, but others were happy to fill me in." Jasper shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, not meeting his father's gaze. "So you've come to what? Threaten us more directly?" Matt asked, his grip tightening on the rifle. "Actually, I've come to make you an offer," Silas replied. "A genuine one this time." Before Matt could respond, the cabin door opened behind him and Willa stepped onto the porch, Faith cradled in her arms. "We're not interested in selling," she said firmly. "No matter what you offer." Silas studied her for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "Not asking you to sell." Quite the opposite. He dismounted, handing his reins to Jasper. "Mind if I come closer to talk? Seems undignified to shout across the yard." Matt hesitated, then gave a short nod, though he didn't lower the rifle. Silas approached alone, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. "I'll be direct," he said, looking between Matt and Willa. "I've been watching what you've built here. How you've overcome every obstacle some of our making, I admit, and I've been impressed." "Forgive us if we find that hard to believe," Willa replied coolly. "Understandable." Silas removed his hat, revealing gray hair and a face weathered by years under the Arizona sun. "But the truth is, I respect tenacity and skill. You've shown both, and now I find myself with a problem that those qualities might help solve." "What problem?" Matt asked, suspicion evident in his voice. "Labor," Silas said simply. "Good men are hard to find out here and even harder to keep. My foreman's moving on, heading to California for his health. I need someone who understands horses, can manage men, and isn't afraid to stand up for what's right, even to me." His gaze fixed on Matt. "I'm offering you the position." The offer was so unexpected that for a moment, neither Matt nor Willa could respond. Finally, Matt found his voice. "Why would you want to hire someone you've been trying to ruin?" "Because trying to ruin you hasn't worked," Silas replied with surprising candor. "And at my age, I've learned to recognize when I'm fighting a losing battle. Better to turn enemies into allies when possible." "And if we refuse?" Willa asked. "Then we go back to being competitors," Silas said with a shrug. "But I'm hoping you'll at least consider the offer. Full foreman salary, use of the Tate brand and resources for your horse breeding on the side, and an end to the unpleasantness of recent months." He turned to go, then paused, looking back at them. "Take some time to think it over. Let me know your decision by the end of the week." With a nod, he returned to his horse, mounted up, and led his party away from the property. When they were gone, Matt and Willa looked at each other in disbelief. "What just happened?" Willa asked, adjusting Faith in her arms. "I think Silas Tate just offered an olive branch," Matt replied, setting the rifle aside. "The question is whether we can trust him." They discussed the offer late into the night, weighing the advantages and risks. The foreman's position would provide a steady income beyond what their horse breeding alone could generate in these early years. Access to the Tate resources, their grazing lands, stables, and breeding stock could accelerate the growth of their own business. And an alliance with the most powerful family in the area would provide security they currently lacked. But could they trust Silas Tate? Was this genuine recognition of their worth, or a more subtle attempt to control them? "What do you think?" Matt asked as they lay in bed, Faith sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby. Willa was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I think," she said finally, "that Silas Tate is a businessman above all else. He's decided we're more valuable as allies than enemies. And Jasper? He'll follow his father's lead, at least openly." Willa turned to face Matt in the darkness. "It's a risk, but one with potentially high rewards, and if it doesn't work out, we'll be no worse off than we are now," Matt finished. "And we'll have learned more about our adversaries in the process." 2 days later, they rode to the Tate Ranch with Faith bundled securely against Willa's chest. The main house was impressive, a 2-story structure of stone and timber that spoke of the wealth the Tates had accumulated over the years. Silas received them in his study, a room lined with books that reminded Willa poignantly of her father's collection. Jasper was notably absent, which Willa took as a good sign. Perhaps Silas understood that his son's presence would only heighten tensions. "Have you reached a decision?" Silas asked after they were seated, his tone businesslike but not unfriendly. Matt glanced at Willa, receiving a slight nod before he spoke. "We're willing to accept your offer with a few conditions." "I expected no less," Silas replied with a hint of a smile. "Let's hear them." The negotiation that followed was respectful but firm on both sides. Matt would take the position as foreman, with the understanding that his primary loyalty would be to the ranch's best interests, not necessarily Silas's personal wishes. He would have authority to hire and fire hands, manage the horse program, and implement improvements as he saw fit, within agreed-upon budgets. In return, the Quincy's would retain full ownership of their land and their existing horse stock. They would be allowed to use a designated portion of Tate grazing land for their breeding program, and would have access to the Tate stallions for breeding purposes, with a fair division of the resulting foals. Most importantly, the harassment would end completely. Any breach of this agreement by either Jasper or the Tate ranch hands would nullify the entire arrangement. By the time they shook hands on the deal, the sun was setting over the mountains. Silas walked them to their wagon, his expression thoughtful. "You drive a hard bargain," he said, helping Willa up to the seat while Matt secured their horses to the back. "But I respect that. It's how I built my own empire." Willa settled Faith more comfortably in her sling before replying. "We're not looking to build an empire, Mr. Tate. Just a good life for our family." Silas nodded, his gaze shifting to the sleeping infant. "A worthy goal." He stepped back, allowing Matt to climb up beside his wife. "I'll expect you Monday morning to start getting acquainted with the operation, Quincy." "I'll be here," Matt confirmed, taking up the reins. As they drove away, Willa leaned against Matt's shoulder. "Do you think we've made the right decision?" she asked softly. Matt's arm tightened around her. "I think we've made the best decision we could with what we know. The rest we'll handle as it comes." The transition wasn't without challenges. Jasper, though outwardly compliant with his father's decisions, made his displeasure known in subtle ways. Some of the ranch hands loyal to him were initially resistant to Matt's authority. And there were moments when Matt questioned whether he had made the right choice, particularly on long days when he returned home exhausted, having seen too little of Willa and Faith. But gradually, things improved. Matt's fair treatment of the men and his undeniable skill with horses won over most of the reluctant hands. The breeding program flourished with access to the Tate resources, allowing them to expand faster than they had dreamed possible. And Silas, true to his word, became if not exactly a friend, then at least a respectful ally. By the time Harold Watson returned the following summer to collect the horses he had ordered and place additional ones, the Quincy operation had transformed. The original 3 foals had grown into magnificent yearlings that exceeded even Watson's expectations. Their brood mare herd had expanded to include 7 quality mares, with plans for more. And the cabin, while still modest compared to the Tate house, had been expanded to include a proper bedroom for Faith and a small office where Willa kept the breeding records. "You've done well for yourselves," Watson observed as they showed him the new facilities. "Very well indeed." "We've had help," Matt acknowledged, with a nod toward where Silas was inspecting one of the new foals with a critical eye. "Sometimes from unexpected quarters." Watson chuckled. "Life has a way of surprising us. Speaking of which, I have a proposition for you both." The proposition was even more generous than they had hoped, a standing order for 6 horses per year, with premium prices for exceptional animals. Additionally, Watson offered to connect them with other California buyers who were looking for quality stock. "You could become the premier horse breeders in the territory," he told them. "With the right connections and continued quality, there's no limit to what you could build here." As Watson departed with the yearlings they had raised, Silas approached Matt and Willa where they stood watching the dust of the California-bound herd disappear into the distance. "Quite a coup," Silas said approvingly. "Watson doesn't commit to just anyone." "We've worked hard to earn his trust," Willa replied, bouncing Faith on her hip. Now a year old, their daughter was a lively, curious child with Matt's blue eyes and Willa's auburn hair. "Indeed you have." Silas watched Faith with an expression that might almost have been wistful. "You know, when my Jasper was born, I had such hopes for him, for the dynasty we would build together." Matt and Willa exchanged a glance, surprised by this unexpected glimpse into Silas's thoughts. "But a man can't choose the nature of his children," Silas continued. "Only try to guide them as best he can." He straightened, his moment of reflection passing. "In any case, I wanted to let you know that I'm making some changes to the ranch management, creating a new position, assistant manager, overseeing all horse operations." "And who will fill this position?" Matt asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "You, if you'll accept it," Silas confirmed. "With a corresponding increase in salary and profit sharing, your work as foreman has been exemplary, and this is the logical next step." The offer was generous, more than generous. It would provide further security for their family and additional resources for their breeding program. But it would also mean more responsibility, more time away from home. "I'll need to discuss it with my wife," Matt said, his hand finding Willa's. "Of course." Silas nodded. "Family should always come first in these decisions. Let me know when you've decided." As he walked away, Willa looked up at Matt, a question in her eyes. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Matt replied slowly, "that 5 years ago I was a drifter with nothing but my horse and saddle. And now I'm being offered a position that most men in the territory would kill for." "Because you've earned it," Willa said firmly. "Your skill, your integrity, your hard work, those are what Silas values." Matt smiled down at her, love evident in his expression. "Maybe. But I wouldn't be here at all if not for you. You're the one who gave me a reason to stop drifting, to build something lasting." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Faith already asleep in her bed inside, they made their decision. Matt would accept the new position, with certain conditions to ensure he still had time for their own operation and, most importantly, for his family. "We've come a long way," Willa said softly, her head resting on Matt's shoulder. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it." "From the moment you dropped those eggs on the boardwalk," Matt teased, earning a playful swat from his wife. "I'm serious," Willa said, though she was smiling. "After my father died, I felt so worthless, like I had nothing left, nothing to offer." "They told me I was nothing," she whispered, echoing the words she had spoken to him years ago on the night he had proposed. Matt turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "Then they never knew what everything was," he repeated, his voice low and fervent. "And they still don't. But I do." The kiss they shared was as sweet and promising as their first had been, but deeper now, strengthened by the years they had spent building a life together, overcoming obstacles, and creating the family that was their greatest joy. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, talking quietly about their plans for the future. More horses, perhaps some cattle, expansion of their house as Faith grew, and, God willing, more children joined their family. Continued cooperation with Silas Tate, though always maintaining their independence. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be droughts and floods, difficult foldings and market fluctuations. Jasper Tate might never fully accept their place in his father's esteem. But together they could face whatever challenges arose, secure in the love and partnership they had forged. "You ever regret it?" Willa asked suddenly. "Stopping to help me that day, taking on my problems as your own?" Matt's answer was immediate and unequivocal. "Not for a single moment." As night settled fully over their homestead, they went inside to check on their sleeping daughter before retiring to their own bed. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities they had once hardly dared to dream of. From nothing to everything, that was the journey they had traveled together. And whatever lay ahead, they would face it as they had faced everything else, side by side, stronger together than they could ever be apart.